Today we're going to be going over the 4 golden rules of engaging a fight. If you can get most of these checked off, chances are it's something that you want to take advantage of. Every fight inherently has a risk, and this list is meant to get you thinking about what the benefits and drawbacks are to each one that you can take. First up, we're going to be talking about numbers advantages. Obviously, the most important numbers advantage that you guys have is over that like button, so make sure that you hit it so that you can tell us that you guys enjoyed the video, and we'll keep more coming your way. Oh yeah, and if you don't turn on notifications, those 0-10 Yasuos on your team aren't going to see this video. Those Yasuo players suffer from this first problem. You never want to take fights at a numbers disadvantage. Yes, there are scenarios where you can win those 2v3s or those 4v5s, however, generally, it's not a good idea to do so. Think about how much difference one ability makes. The difference between a level 2 and a level 3 fight, right? It's huge. You don't want to take fights when you're at a level disadvantage, so don't do it at a numbers disadvantage. That's 4 potential abilities that you're missing out on. When you're down a player, it can be really difficult to do anything unless you have some extremely impactful ultimates, such as Kiana or potentially Cassiopeia. You need those really big, super lockdown ultimates like that Kiana stun that snakes around the wall in order to stop your opponents from being able to leverage all of the abilities that they have over you. And chances are that you're not going to get the opportunity to do that, so don't look for it. If you understand that you're about to take a 4v5, a 3v5, or similar situation, don't do it. It's probably not the right answer. So how do you avoid this? Well, early on in the game, you want to ask yourself some simple questions. Question number 1, if you aren't a jungler, is where is the enemy jungler, and where is your jungler? If you don't know where the enemy jungler is, then you should understand that you will always be taking a fight at the risk of it being at a numbers disadvantage. If you don't know where the enemy jungler is, then you should absolutely be prepared to avoid them when you take a fight. Don't just waste your movement ability and go all the way in on your laner, overextending and getting yourself killed. This goes straight into our second point. Is it a bait? Before we bite down on that bait though, let's talk about our website, GameLeap.com. We have tons of challenger level content, and all of it gets to go way more in depth than what you can see here on YouTube. I'll also be releasing exclusive guides that will only be there, so make sure that you check it out. So, how do you tell if it's a bait? Well, is the enemy support just kinda sitting there for no reason, with nobody in sight? Sounds a little suspicious to me. This could be under tower, somewhere in the jungle. If there's people missing and they are the key members of the enemy team, like the mid laner, or the carry jungler, or the carry top laner, something like that, well, you might want to rethink what you're going to do. All of a sudden, you go for that tower dive, the enemy support flashes away, and then 4 members of the enemy team pile on from the jungle, it's going to be a really bad situation. You need to keep your eye out for this sort of thing. The minimap and the tab menu are actually a big deal here. You might spot somebody out on a ward. You're looking at that tab menu and maybe you notice that somebody on the enemy team has a suspiciously low amount of items. They might just be coming back from a recall. On the flip side though, if you recognize that this person is probably baiting, you might want to consider thinking through about whether or not it's going to work for them. If you're just so strong that you can completely just blow through them and destroy them, well, then the fact that they're baiting doesn't matter. This is something that generally comes with experience. What you definitely should not do, though, is not take fights. Even if you might think that they're baiting, take the fight. Why? Because if you do make a mistake, you know 100% that you made a mistake. If you don't take that fight, and it ends up being the right play, you might not notice that that person wasn't actually baiting. You need to give yourself an opportunity to learn. Making the mistake is better than doing nothing and learning nothing from it. Over time, you'll get to learn your strength and understand what you can and cannot do. This is that sort of thing that you might hear referred to as limit testing. Once you know your limits, it'll be a lot easier to spot out somebody who's trying to bait you. You'll better understand when and when not to go in, and overall, you're just going to become a better player. On top of that though, our third point actually feeds directly back into, is it bait? We're going to be talking about enemy cooldowns. Knowing what abilities or even just what summoner spells your opponents have access to in this moment can help you determine whether or not they're trying to bait you, and will help you determine what your limit exactly is. Let's say you're playing an assassin like Talon, and you're going after the enemy Ashe AD carry. Do they have flash up? It's an important question. If they do, and they're kind of positioning in a spot where you can kill them, they might be baiting you, and they're just going to flash ulti you in the face, and their team's going to jump on you from nowhere. Again though, make sure that you learn from that mistake. Moving on from just how the cooldowns relates to baiting though, what does it mean when the enemy has an important cooldown up? It changes from champion to champion, but the concept stays the same. If they have an important cooldown, whether it be an ulti or a crucial ability like Morgana Black Shield, then you have to play around it when you're going to be engaging. You can't just toss out your abilities at the closest character and expect it to work when the enemy team has something like a Morgana Black Shield to block all of your CC and magic damage. It just won't work. You need to consider what they want to do, who they want to protect, and then play around how they're going to do that. In the Morgana example, usually you get her to waste her Black Shield on herself and not on an important carry by threatening her directly. That means either by throwing out CC or skill shots towards her, and just being a general nuisance to her. It might not directly impact the enemy AD carry, but it indirectly affects them because they don't have access to that shield. Why? Because either the Morgana has already used it or is zoned away from her. This can get really complex as you start to think about all of the impactful abilities that the enemy team has. It can be from their support, mid laner, doesn't matter. All you need to know is that the enemy team has access to it, and you need to know how they're going to want to use it. Another aspect of enemy cooldowns that's important is understanding what it means when your opponent wastes it. Let's go back to Morgana. She also has a really powerful bind that lasts a long time. If she just throws it out and completely misses, then that might be the time to go in. She burned that CC cooldown, and now it's going to be harder for her to peel you away, or peel you away from somebody else. The obvious example that I can give you is when somebody wastes an ultimate and just completely misses it or does nothing with it. Yeah, then that's probably the time to go in. They just wasted over a minute-long cooldown. Sometimes though, champions' ultimates are less impactful than their basic abilities. Morgana is a pretty good example. Her ulti takes time and really isn't all that useful when you compare to what the Black Shield and Binding can do for her. However, it's not something that you can just ignore. It just weighs less than the rest of her kit. After talking about numbers advantages, baiting, and enemy cooldowns, we're going to be moving on to the last and most important ability here, and that is being decisive. Everything else that I've said in this entire video does not matter at all if you are not decisive. You might be able to recognize some of the things that we talk about, but if you don't do anything about it, well, then you're not going to get anywhere. You need to make the decision to go in. You need to make the decision to engage that fight. Now, this is definitely something that's very role and champion dependent. However, no matter what role you're playing, everybody has the opportunity to engage a fight on certain champions. It might be more common on top laners or supports. However, Ashe has that ultimate and she can absolutely engage a fight if she sees somebody overextend. That arrow stun is no joke. Or maybe you're playing mid. Cassiopeia is a great example. Her flash ultimate, incredibly powerful engage. Her W also prevents people from flashing or dashing out. Even if you don't have any form of CC or actual engage, I have a lesson for you that I learned a long time ago. And it might sound silly, but it's actually true. The best form of CC is just death. You might be playing Veigar, and if that AD carry overextends, press R. He's just gonna explode. Even if he doesn't die instantly, he's gonna be way too low to take any fight realistically. He'll just die from somebody sneezing on him. Maybe you're playing an AD carry. Auto the person. You might even crit if you're building crit. And you're gonna do a bunch of damage. A lot of people seem to think when you say the word engage that you mean go in until everybody's dead. But that's just not true. You could engage and nobody could die. You might do something else during the fight though. In an engagement, you might end up killing a dragon, or a baron, or a tower, or an inhibitor. And this all relates back to being decisive. You need to decide that killing that thing, whether it be a champion or an objective, is what you wanted from the fight, and you can stop fighting and then maybe fight again later. Because if you never stop fighting, you will inevitably make a mistake that costs you the game. Making decisions is about making the right decisions and stopping the wrong ones. It's not about only making the right ones. Lastly, and I cannot stress this enough, don't be afraid to take the fight and make the mistake. You'll learn way more and way faster if you do. Don't forget to check out our website, GameLeap.com. We have tons of challenger level content, and all of it gets to go way more in depth than you can see here elsewhere on YouTube. I'll also be making guides that are only posted there, so make sure that you go check it out in the description below.